who's our consultant on that, will be there. And we've invited we invited all the people that are supposed to be the people at those things. But anyone is welcome to attend. It'll be at 10 o'clock again. It's also got a Zoom invitation, so if you know me or find me, I can send you a Zoom invitation if you don't want to come, but you want to listen in. So that's fine. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. Is there any other public comment tonight?
About this or anything?
Anything?
I just wanted to say, I'm very excited about this, and I hope that even if you go with an alternative, that at some point, there'll be enough interest locally that we can pursue other parts of it that I think just really tie in a continuity to the town. I don't think we lose our identity at all. And, I support a lot more than I think you're gonna be able to do right now. But that's record.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? All right. Next agenda item is review and approval for minutes August 24th and public hearing on August 31st. Did all the board members get a chance to look those over? And if there were no errors or items left out, I will hear a motion to accept them both.
I'll move.
Eli with the first or second?
I'll second.
Heather with the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. All right, let's get into it. Next item is Vital Village Scoping Study and Public Survey Results with Chris Sargent from DuBois & King Engineering.
Thank you very much. I'm Chris Sargent, with DuBois & King. I am the planning manager for D&K, and it was my team that has done the bulk of the work to get us where we are. John, you were going to start off, and I just jumped right in, so go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So first I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Appreciate your attendance here at this important meeting. The purpose of this agenda item is to discuss the results of the Vital Village Scoping Study. That's a project that has been worked on for approximately 14 months now by your local municipality here, the Village of Enosburg Falls. And the public survey was done this past July and June, so this past summer. Also, I want to read to you a letter that I submitted to the Board of Trustees on behalf of the management team, which was a committee that was put together to work through the scoping study process and help the village make decisions about which direction to take this in, and has been working closely with DuBois & King, Chris Sargent and his team as we went through this process over the past 14 months. So I'll read to you the letter that I submitted on behalf of the management team to the Board of Trustees regarding this study and the alternatives that we've been reviewing since we got the results from the public survey in July. So on behalf of the Vital Village Scoping Study management team, I've been asked to write a letter collectively recommending the preferred option of the team regarding this project. With nearly 14 months of work into the scoping study, the management team recommends alternative number 3, the access alternative minimal. After much discussion and at times compromise between the different members of the team, this option keeps much of the intent of the scoping study, but keeps the current number of parking spaces on Main Street and Depot Street, which was a clear concern that surfaced as a result of the public meeting held April 28th, 2021, and the subsequent public survey done in June and July as a result of that public meeting's feedback. To summarize the recommendation, this option keeps available parking in the downtown area, reduces the size of the suggested bump outs on Main Street, adds truck aprons, improves pedestrian crossing safety, and adds some aesthetic streetscaping improvements. Although approximately 60% of the respondents to this summer's survey were in favor of the do-nothing option, the management team felt that given the overwhelming public support of the Vital Village efforts over the past several years, the entire project should not be completely discounted as a result of this survey. There will be additional maintenance to contend with for the Village Public Works Department regarding the bump outs, but with the smaller bump out size, this should be doable. The management team unanimously recommends option number 3 for the board's consideration. Sincerely, Jonathan Elwell, Village Manager. So I've sort of given away the conclusion here of Chris's presentation, and you know up front what the recommendation of the management team is to the Board of Trustees. But Chris is going to walk you through some of the process, the results of the survey, and the 3 alternatives that the management team came down to towards the end of this summer, and again, why we finally landed on what's referred to as alternative number 3, the alternative minimal alternative. And Chris has got a series of slides that he's going to guide everybody through. So Chris, I think you're up.
All right, thanks, John. So I will try to pop through this as quick as possible so we have time for questions, but I do want to start off with just sort of, to anyone who's not familiar with the idea of a scoping study, I wanted to kind of give a quick overview. So scoping study is a tool used to basically take what is an idea and figure out whether it's actually possible and sort of get a feel for, well, what issues are around it that are more physical and on the ground. So the Vital Village study was a wonderful process that created an idea and a bunch of ideas. These are really good things we should do. We should do these things. And the scoping study's purpose was to take that to the next step and come up with a plan for how you might go about some of these things. It isn't the final stop that gets you to being able to build it. There would be other components like needing to get construction documents and engineering designs done. And then at that point, you could get into construction. So there's a number of other opportunities for the public to be involved with this throughout when going from the Vital Village to actually implementing something. So just really quickly, I just wanted to sort of go back to what the management team ultimately said, was recognizing that a lot of work had been done before. There was a several-year process through the Vital Village, and during that process, there was a lot of public engagement, and a lot of it was very, very, very positive. So keeping that in mind, we sort of started with the idea of, with that as our guidepost, and the project area we looked at are what you see there in 1, 3, 4, and 2, basically, and 1, 3, and 4, which are on Main Street Central, Main Street South, at the intersection of Dickinson, the rail trail intersection at Main Street and Depot Street, and parts of Depot Street were sort of where our project began, where we began looking at doing streetscape improvements to address public safety and also aesthetic enhancements and whatnot. So the scoping process has a couple different opportunities for the public to be involved, and it's explicit that you have to have these, and you should. And the first is what's called a local concerns meeting, which is basically we step out, talk about the project, tell people what it is, and say, this is what we're going to try to do. What are you guys concerned about? What worries do you have? What ideas do you have? And we held that in December. There were 14 people attended. We did mail and deliver flyers to local businesses. And people were generally positive and supportive about the idea of traffic calming, improved crosswalks on Main Street particularly. But we did have some conversation where we discovered that people are definitely concerned about parking and don't want to lose parking. So during that period of time, just prior to our public meeting, we put out a small survey and largely asked people what their biggest concerns were. Vehicle speeding was the highest concern. And then we also asked people what they would be most excited about on Main Street. And everybody was very, it's supposed to be yellow, but the greenish yellow there is sort of, yes, please, we would like these things. And it includes more street trees and landscaping, curb extensions or bump outs, traffic calming, pedestrian scale lighting, wayfinding, outdoor seating for businesses. The only thing people were sort of tepid on was stormwater treatment. And these were all things that were talked about in the Vital Village project. So we seem to have really positive support. So we developed alternatives, looking at that whole project area that I showed you on the map earlier. One was focusing on access as sort of its main thing, so maybe adding more parking spaces, improving traffic calming. Then there was another one that was really looking at street trees and green spaces and more green stormwater, and another that looked at bigger public spaces, more opportunities for business expansion and wayfinding. We took these to the public at the meeting that John was talking about earlier on the 28th, and the biggest takeaway we got was that people were unhappy with the amount of opportunity they had to speak their mind about the project. And in response to that, we met with a group and we sort of came up with a new plan to do a second wave of engagement. And so we did there was a poster display in the Pearly block in the windows, and there was an online survey. And we got quite a few responses, 95, ranking the alternatives. And as John said, most people supported doing nothing. So it was 60% folks supported doing nothing, and if you look at the breakouts for all of them, what we call the plaza alternative, 69% of the people who responded were not interested. The verdant one, the one with the trees, 58% were not in support, and the access, 53% were not in support. But doing nothing, 60% were supportive. Obviously, that took us aback a little bit and made us sort of go, okay, well, so then what do we, how do we balance what came before with people's current opinion of things? So the committee, we worked together with the committee, and the committee's ultimate decision was, okay, let's pare what we're looking at down. We're going to focus on Main Street Central. So we're going to make a smaller project. We're still going to look at traffic calming, at least as best we can, and we're going to try to identify alternatives that either leave the same number of parking spaces as are there now, or add parking spaces. And as part of this, we came up with what we're calling this light alternative, which is the third one which the committee has recommended. So obviously, here's your no-build alternative. This is Enosburg Falls Village now. And so nothing would change were we to have selected that. The sort of reduced size access alternative, which is reduced as in it's focusing only on Main Street Central largely. This particular approach has more streetscape options. It's and it has some traffic calming. You guys see this? This is called it's what they call a chicane, and what it is the lanes shift slightly, and on both ends, and that forces drivers to slow down a little bit just because the road moves. They got to sort of navigate that. The way this is proposed in a line, we sort of have to, obviously we have to move some parking spaces, remove some from this side, add them over here. I think this is, right now there's 3 parallel parking here. We were talking about the nose-in parking, which would gain spaces. So in this example, we gained 4 spaces of parking. But there was some discomfort with the bump outs in particular. And for those who don't know what these are, that's these. The advantage to having them is that they shorten the distance for pedestrians to have to cross the road. And they also, by constraining the road visually, you slow drivers down. The wider the pavement is, the more likely people are to go faster. You guys have quite a bit of available pavement. But there was some discomfort with that. Gary was a little concerned about trying to plow around them. That's definitely a common comment we've heard from communities. So this is what we came up with as sort of the third option that was it's a combined approach that really pulls together the public comment, says we don't really, we still want pedestrian improvements, but we don't like those really big bump outs. Don't touch our parking. So this works out so that you have a net, you don't lose or gain parking spaces. Again, we are doing some shifting of the spaces. There's 9 here, because there's a couple over right here that have been removed, and we've added them here. So they're, the 2 that are lost are gained over here. The bump outs are smaller, so this is a smaller one. Same with this, and with the notion too that trucks are more easily able to pull in here and do their unloading, which they do on a regular basis. It does involve adding some street trees, and people were concerned about, doing these curves and the trucks that have to come in. So this is mountable aprons, so they're sloped so the trucks can roll over them, which makes a lot of sense. And let me see what else I should add in here. Largely, though, a lot of the parking is maintained. That's the big thing. So this is the sort of the third recommendation that the management team ultimately settled on as part of the scoping study. One other thing to mention, there's a couple sort of side pieces to this that are part of this. There's a crossing at Depot Street, and this would be an either alternative, but that's there really for safety and to allow for easy connection to the rail trail. And it's paved, so it's not a physical barrier. And then one little side piece of the project is this intersection at Dickinson Ave and Main Street, because of the multiple entrances to Main Marketplace, there's a lot of concerns with crossing there and sort of lack of safety. So we were asked to look at what are called quick build approaches, which are basically things the town can just do without having to go out and get grants or any of that sort of thing, because they're easy. And so we came up with a number of different approaches. No real decision was made on which one to go with because they're easy to do and the town can just test them and see which one works. This was the one that had the most support in the survey that we put out. But didn't have a lot of support. So, largely people just weren't very excited about this. They were more interested in other areas. So these are probably not too worth getting into too much detail. One thing that would make this process easier is if the community can get some cooperation with the marketplace and eliminate one of those, block off one of those entrances, because that's a big part of it, particularly the entrance right near the crosswalk, right? So like I said, there are a couple different approaches. This would be sort of an approach without cooperation from the marketplace. This is another approach, a little more involved, probably, certainly very doable, but a little more aesthetically obvious, I guess. So we've got these as alternatives that the community can consider in the future. So that's the extent of my presentation, so I'm open to any questions that you folks have.
Could you go back to your alternative 2
Yep.
and explain what was lost going to 3?
Yeah, okay, well, let's see, I'm gonna flick back and forth if that works. So one of the things that was lost is we kept the lane shift that's on the left, right?
Yeah.
But we remove it on the right because there where people didn't like these large bump outs that make that nose-in parking over on the right side. That was one of the things that folks were uncomfortable with. So those flatten out, those bump outs we propose go away, right? We also make we make the curb extensions a little smaller on Depot Street there, and also put in the mountable truck aprons. And let's see what else is in this.
So,
And yeah, go ahead.
not to throw out
No.
Kristen, but wouldn't you be able to, with 2, do the mountable curb cut and this one gains 4 spots.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like that would really make people who were worried about parking, and that seems to be the issue. I posed the question when we were talking about a different project a couple of weeks ago, and the issue was parking. If parking was resolved, they didn't have issues about this other thing that we were talking about. It seems like that would really make some people happy to gain 4, do your mountable turns, and, snowplowers will figure it out. They do in other cities, towns all the time. So I don't know why that would, when they were such an outcry with parking, why you would more consider adding those 4.
Yeah, I think the large part was sort of dealing with those larger bump outs was the concern. So,
Another concern that people were expressing that were opposed to a plan like this also had to do with vehicles that are doing deliveries. And there was a strong feeling from some people that the way these bump outs are set, it would be real problems with delivery vehicles coming into Main Street, doing their drop-offs and leaving. They were concerned that the vehicles wouldn't be able to fit in between there with the larger bump outs.
Is that a reality
So that's,
though?
That's probably reasonable.
yeah, I wouldn't say it's far-fetched. I mean, there might be problems depending on the size of the vehicle. If you had an 18-wheeler
Right.
trying to pull into some areas, it could be problematic. So that was one of the reasons too that the management team was really trying to see what we could do with the bump outs and maybe scale them back so that that couldn't be used as an argument against, trying to create some more pedestrian safety type features in the downtown area. So we ended up deciding as a group that scaling the bump outs back would be an acceptable alternative maybe by both sides. And a version that everyone on the management team could stand behind at least. And there were disagreements within the management team too. I mean, it took us a while to hash through some of these things. Some people felt very strongly that, we should submit the plan, as we originally wanted it to be built. And some people felt, very strongly that, well, look, we went through all the trouble of doing this extra public survey, spent a lot of time doing it, and maybe we should pay attention to the results of it and at least take these things into consideration. So it was a lot of back and forth, even within the management team, trying to come to a series of compromises that everyone could look at and say, okay, I can support that plan. And this is what we came up with. Now, having said that, I also want to reiterate, I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again. This is simply a recommendation from the management team. What the Board of Trustees decides to do with this recommendation is absolutely up to them. If they like this plan, they can approve it and adopt it, and we can work as a community to try and make it happen. If they want to make changes to this and want to do something closer to alternative 2 or some other variation, they have every right to do that.
And just one point on that. So one of the reasons you do a scoping study is when I showed you the phases, right? The next phase is the planning, and that's the engineering phase, basically. Well, in order to, if you're going to go to V-Trans and ask for the funding to help pay for that engineering, they want you to have done a scoping study. But from the way I understand that process, there would be nothing to stop you folks from going, okay, we like most of this, except over there, we actually do want to do something like that. And I think that they'd probably be willing to work with you on that. They just want to know that the community's done the due diligence, asked the right questions, made an effort to identify any real problems,
And all the games and the spots are in front of the Notch building?
With that, you mean?
You said 6?
So, yeah, there would be, yes, the four are
4 there and 2 on the park, okay.
well, except those,
You're swapping sides on
two,
the
you're swapping sides. So this is the spot, it's this nose-in parking that
really
really gains you, because right now you have 3 here.
Yeah,
So-
and I don't know that they ever have, I mean, that's the Notch building, I guess it could be something in the future, but I don't know if they have big trucks pulling in front of their
I guess
place.
with large bump outs, there's no catch basins from Depot Street all the way down to School Street. Won't water with bigger bump outs get trapped in those areas?
I think that would be something that would be have to be tackled in the engineering phase, and yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that would be part of the engineering design, to make sure the stormwater got dealt with appropriately. Yeah. We have other questions over the hands raised. Come on,
Comment and a question.
Yeah.
I like, or suggestion, I like the idea of starting to do something at Dickinson. I think it's all part of slowing things down both ways. It kind of makes a change up there and slows things down at that intersection. And that's a total mess by my perspective, that whole area. There's one big road cut. And it doesn't help anybody. I don't see how it helps anybody but have it there. And it does mess up that whole intersection for people to walk. then I personally prefer the bigger bump outs. And when that happens, the driveway that comes out parallel to Depot Street gets harder. That's 2, could you flip back to 3? I know it gets a little subtler there.
Yep.
But it almost creates that there's gotta always be a left. There's only, what are there, 3 houses there? There's 3
All right, I see what you're
houses.
saying, yep.
Yeah.
Like,
To-
Well, there's an apartment
Two.
building plus a house, right? A double plus, and that's not a lot of traffic, I'm not.
Right, yeah, you're talking about them pulling out here.
What I am saying is
Yep.
making it even that much harder for them, so that means they gotta go across the very fast, busy intersection. That hasn't been slowed down really yet. And,
Interesting.
yeah, so just question and comment, thank you.
Jim brings up a really good point there with that, and I don't remember where it was in the process. It might have been with that build grant thing that we talked about at some point closing off that and making it access onto Depot Street for those people. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Somebody should think about that again in this. And
So
then,
I'll tell you that we, in the bigger
yeah,
example, we did.
but
Yeah, so,
just throwing that out there, because I agree with what Jim is saying, that looks like a nightmare if I had to get out there all the time.
Yep.
And then I live on Dickinson, so I am very concerned about that crosswalk area. I've literally had to pull a kiddo out of the crosswalk before they got hit by a car, and that was with looking to make sure, because there's a pole there. So literally, unless you are out in the road almost, people don't necessarily see you. And then doing something there, I think people coming off of Dickinson that have a tendency to speed either way, potentially would have to slow down.
Yep.
Yeah, what else was I gonna say?
It's a good spot.
yeah.
But anyway, those were my two.
And the good thing is the things we proposed are fairly easy to do.
Has there
Right.
been any conversation, I know there was another project, Upper Elm and whatnot, that we looked at and we had to get permission from landowners, that fell through, couldn't get all the permission from landowners. Has anybody spoken to the marketplace to see if that's a dead end or not before we?
No.
Yeah, to my knowledge, nobody's had any conversations with the owner of the marketplace to, see what their thoughts would be about trying to
Because it might gain
reduce the number of accesses into that property.
But you could do this without, that's within the town's right of way.
Yeah.
So the town could do as it chooses to do
Right, I think as Chris said, all of these plans that he showed, we could do within our own right of ways. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, I think you were saying though that if you really wanted to reduce some of the safety issues, maybe that middle access in
Yeah.
the property
that. This is the thing.
could be looked at.
If you
to-
worked with them and they were willing to block this off, like with planters or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, that would be optimal.
Yeah.
Because that eliminates that, you don't need to have that many access points to the property.
I remember what I was gonna say. So I would definitely urge the trustees to do something other than nothing, with those recommendations. I'm a little bit disappointed that some of the opposition in the other meetings couldn't be here tonight to kind of see these and say, oh yeah, that does change our concerns. But I definitely think not doing nothing is not the way to go. So I'm glad that the management team is proposing at least that number 3.
Yeah, and I worked for Regional Planning Commission for a long time, and so I would always tell my communities, keep your options open. And by having something that you're saying, okay, we'd like to do this, at least you're keeping your options open. Exactly what that looks like when you get down the road, you'll work that out. But you've got something to say, okay, we'd like to go after some funding, even if it's for only a piece of what's in either of those things. You have that as an opportunity.
I know I said it at another meeting. This whole process being started just by people getting together saying we need to do something, and then the doors that opened on the way because of the momentum and the positive feeling around Enosburg, the articles in the paper and everything all worked toward a positive end, toward approval for a lot of grants. And if we get to this point and we say no, any pursuit on grants is gonna be looked at a little more jaded, saying, oh, maybe that committee really doesn't wanna do anything, and it's gonna be that much harder to get grant money. I don't know how spread out that will be, municipalities, nonprofits, I don't know, but I just feel there was so much momentum, and I'm happy that you guys looked at, there was all this support around Harvest Fest, at the school meeting, at the library, I mean, there was just overwhelming support, and then, and I wish we had attendance for some of those meetings, we could go back to those people and say, we need you back out here showing your support, because all of a sudden this other group is saying no, and where did you guys go? Because I think there was overwhelming support, I think it's still out there, so I applaud you guys not forgetting that piece.
Any other questions, comments?
Just want to go back to Shauna and just say that again. I'm fine saying it again. I think something should be done at Dickinson. It's easy. Those are all really easy, cheap things. Not putting myself in place of anybody else. I'll go shop. I would volunteer to go talk to Shauna to ask him to close that off for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something, just to see what would happen as an experiment. I think one of the great things that happened here was the pop-up days.
Right.
Where you put things up for people to actually see them. Rick Green got in a truck and drove it. It was great. A lot of people paid attention to that. So I think that kind of an experiment is a real positive, cheap date to just see what the outcome is.
Right, and that, like you said, I mean, the nice thing about that is it can be tested. So, it's not a permanent decision, it's just let's try this.
Yeah.
See how it works, let's get people's feedback on it, see if it works for the marketplace, and if it does, then you step back and say, okay, how can we make this more permanent? Or do we want to just keep putting this back up? And we can certainly do this every year.
Does closing off that potentially create more parking spaces? Can't think of
I
it.
think it's,
You could, sure.
say again?
You could, sure,
I'm
absolutely.
wondering, that seems to be a very big issue for everybody in town, so that would solve that issue, and then, the bump outs, which seems to be an aesthetic increasing, at least in these examples, we'd be able to get those. We have more parking, it seems to be like,
And it's simplest for at least gain two parking.
Yeah.
It's simplest for start reaching bigger.
we gain full.
That'd be my opinion.
Right. And the speed through Main Street still, it's amazing.
Right.
Yes.
Because it's pretty wide.
Well, and so like on sample 2 or 3 of the now, coming off Depot Street, like Shawnee's, on Depot Street,
Just right away.
like you come way out.
Mhm.
Is that also though, I mean, I know that kind of is a maybe hazardous to turn out onto the Main Street that way, but does that slow traffic coming into that main vein
Yes.
right there? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm amazed that, I can't tell you, like people that travel into our business who aren't from here, they're amazed at the truck traffic that comes through that comes to that little main vein there in our business district, that they think, and they're not from around here, to bring it up to us. It's gotta be a lot, because they're not from here.
Yeah, and the way this is configured right now, there's a lot of open area, I mean, it's all asphalt, and that really, that creates a sense of, for people walking, they feel less safe because they're not protected. And it also enables, people just don't, it's wide, so they just drive fast.
Yeah.
Whereas choking it down a little bit, obviously you have to balance the needs of whatever vehicles you have there. So there are trucks turning there, they're, even in this particular configuration, I think you'd want to have them out over curbs to allow for that. But, yeah, that's more reasons to do this.
I have to believe that, before I forget my thoughts. I've worked in a lot of other communities too, where they're very close to each other, and even in the city of Burlington, and they all figure out how to maneuver with what they've got.
Yep.
And the trucks they adapt, instead of our business district having to adapt and then not allowing more business and more hardscaping and landscaping and all those things that make a small community look more attractive to come into and make you want to pull over and shop there. While I think it's important to concern ourselves with, maneuverability in delivering and, you know, if those people want to get their products to these businesses, they'll figure it out.
Good.
I'm more, my input is that I like 2 a lot more than I like 3. And,
Me too.
I also am oddly supportive of focusing on this area, not thinking about that depot or, you know, making other big headways in other places, but trying to focus right here, because that is
Same.
literally the heart and where everything starts and stops and sets the tone
It does.
for people coming and going. And I can on some level feel Gary's pain and about the bump outs, but that's a big street. And I think the bump out that's at what would be the north end that we've all been talking about is really important to be out there. To stop people coming down the hill, to make it feel smaller. And then the bump outs in the interior of that space, from my sense, are a lot less important, if you will, because you could have 2 major crosswalks that are close to each other and the other ones sort of have that distance. So from a servicing maintenance perspective, you sort of split the difference there. I realize that's a thing. I do realize that's a thing, and I'm oddly compromising. But I really like what this does, how it feels. I think it's a very reasonable compromise. I don't think this is radical, but it's nice.
And it adds the spots.
And it adds, I like the change up in the parking. I think it's a good idea, the diagonals on Lincoln Park. I think there's a lot of really good things here.
Yeah.
A lot of really good things there that don't hurt anybody. Again, the bump out compromise could be at both ends. But once you switch when you do the bend, it changes everything in a nice way. It does make people slow down, which means the bump outs can be a little bit less aggressive because they're already going slower. It's a combination of they don't see you and they're going fast when you have to stick your head out there to see what's going on. This is great.
Yeah.
This is great, John, and the board, and anybody else who's on, Greta, I know you were on the committee. I don't know who else is on it, but this is great. I think it's really a really nice plan. Reasonable, balanced, pretty.
Does the management team have a particular feeling on any of these, or is that not a fair question to ask at this point?
Yeah,
I think you missed the letter that John wrote.
You mean the board or the minute? I guess the management team. They proposed 3.
yeah, three.
Which really was, I mean, from my opinion, it was trying to balance the incredible, overwhelming negative response from a survey that was completed, where the far majority of respondents wanted to do nothing. I mean, in my opinion, I would prefer access number 2 as well. You know, but it's a matter of trying to compromise. So, I mean, I appreciate everyone's support of 2 as well. And so, as a community.
I think do nothing though doesn't tell you anything.
No.
It doesn't really. It's you know, binary. It's yes or no. It doesn't get you. It doesn't help you get ahead or define what should be getting ahead. And the consistent theme has been parking. And this doesn't hurt anything. This particular one adds. So just by the numbers, it's a good thing. The retail spaces that are active and get deliveries can still get them. You haven't changed any of that. You know, going on, it's okay. The Notch, they have their own driveway coming in and out, so there's no deliveries there that have to happen out front.
Right.
There's no retail other than the bank, if I'm not wrong, on the west side. B still can get her deliveries. I don't know how those come in. And then the park just got nicer, right? It brings you to the park. It puts you right in front of the plaque. It puts you right in front of the fence, right in front of all the monuments when you pulled into that park.
The overwhelming noise you've heard about parking, I don't know why you, I mean.
Right, why wouldn't we get more spaces?
I would just encourage the select board to answer those cries with 2 and give them more parking. And let's do it. Let's get it done.
I'm still, forgive me, this is not fully baked because I'm trying to figure out how to say it the right way. But number 1, I really don't think it's fair to prioritize an 18-wheeler for 20 minutes a week over human beings every day, all day long, during daylight hours crossing the road. You really, I hate to be this girl, but we need to think about pedestrian, human traffic. And when we, like you said, making the priority for the deliveries, you know, the fire truck, yes, I get it. We need to be able to be safe. But I think we need to prioritize pedestrian safety over an 18-wheeler for 20 minutes, even daily. 20 minutes a day of an 18-wheeler is not, you know, people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, people trying to cross the street. It's not apples to apples. The thing, please note that I am overwhelmingly in support of doing something. My question that I would really like to raise to Main Street business owners, or my hypothesis perhaps, is great concern about construction, about ripping everything up and taking all the time it's going to take to make this be. And so I hypothesize that watering it down and doing less is still going to take a construction crew and ripping up the street and making everything wonky for a while. If anyone's driven through Bakersfield in the last, like I say, I would be great to pose these questions to these people, because I would love to be able to say, well, 4 extra parking spots as like the carrot at the end of living through construction hour. But I'm wondering if the overwhelming do nothing, only a part of the Vital Village, like if we take Vital Village as 2 years and the overwhelming negative was what, a third, not even a third of the public input that was gained. I wonder if watering it down or trying to do a reduced or a less thing, it's still going to take a construction crew and messing up the street and affecting their business. So I wonder if we just do a bigger thing and get 4 more parking spots instead of trying to hold back, because it's going to be a disruption no matter how. Is this making any sense?
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's actually a very sound argument.
Well, another thing we gotta do is the people's mindset. I don't know if you've been in town during the day, but some people use the crosswalks, but the majority of them don't use crosswalks. They're going across to the liquor store, and they're not using crosswalks. They're just going around wherever they want to go across the streets. So we gotta get people to learn the mindset of using crosswalks, because there's a lot of people that don't use them.
Yeah.
Good point.
I also, I'm new in town, I've only been here about a year, but I live on Church Street, so I walk a lot everywhere, and now I pick up my grandson from school and I have to cross at Dickinson, and I agree with you, that something needs to be done there, but not everybody stops. I always wait to make sure somebody really does stop, and do they really gonna stop? It's scary. And so the school children, I think there's more kids and more traffic going back and forth right there now too, so we need to consider that since schools actually happen.
Do you have a response to the point she's making? Like, should it be, because I think it's a really great point, time spent on a project of this magnitude, whether it's over a 2-year span or longer span versus short. What is your feedback on that? What have you seen? Should we disrupt it really badly for a short amount of time and get it all done?
Yeah, you're asking about the construction time.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, you have to have a construction crews there. They're doing work, and that's disruptive. Obviously, this is Enosburg's plan, not mine. But the reality is that. So whenever doing improvements. I mean, it's like if, for example, not that you're doing this, if you guys were installing new water line in here, you would absolutely, at the same time you were doing that, want to plan to come along and do the road at the same time after that was done, because you don't want to have to do work more than once, you don't have to tear it up more than once, and it saves money. So, I mean, the advantage is that you have a crew come in here once and do it. Obviously, it's going to be more expensive because you're talking about just building something bigger. And it probably will take a little longer, but is it going to take that much longer? I don't know. I mean, I think that that's a fair argument.
That's why you want to keep in mind that there's 0 water.
Right.
The side where the liquor store is, from Pearl Street all the way up to Orchard, is an old 100-year-old water line. They have to replace or break.
Well, and I mean, just again, let's get back to the point that if you know that that's going to happen in the next 10 years, then don't do this until you do that. You know, plan them together. But you can do that. But you've done the due diligence with this to be able to set yourself up to go out for the funding to do the water line and then get additional funding to do that. And actually, you'll save the town would save money because you'd already have a crew here. And it's that type of you know, if you're mobilizing a team like that, it's less expensive to have them do everything. Go ahead.
I just want to say that we're in the village a lot. And as far as delivery trucks are concerned, the busiest places that I have seen are in front of the marketplace, in front of the liquor store. Yeah, and Wood Meadow Market. And actually, I kind of wonder what happens if those spaces, if there are cars in those spaces, where do those trucks go?
Well, right. I don't know.
Now, there's space on the Siskoy, and there's space down in front of the cemetery.
But there's cars there already.
But if they're there, where do the trucks go?
Usually,
I mean, they got
They figure it out, is that your point? Figure it out.
Typically,
Right.
you're seeing a lot of that in the morning. Too. You're seeing that early mornings.
Right. So I mean, and that's the other thing is that you know, timing. When is the business open? If they're there before there's a lot of people in there, then it's much easier for them to do them. That really doesn't change if you reconfigure things, as long as there's enough space for them to put in.
Right. Taking my zoning hat off, for 20 plus years I worked on Depot Street. My only concern with that bump out adjacent to the Notch building there, a tractor trailer coming up through Main Street, turning onto Depot, one at the stop sign at Depot, potentially making that left turn. Is there enough room to make those two?
Yeah, and that yeah, and so you know, this if tonight the trustees say no, we appreciate your recommendation, guys, and we can go number 2 and give me the direction to do that. It's possible, but not mandatory. I would just make sure that this is carried over for whatever, because we heard that, and that we don't want to have that sort of potential conflicts happen. So yeah.
St. Albans has arches. Some cities, some villages have arches coming into the village. St. Albans has big banners. Does that stop people? Does that slow them down?
I don't know. That's a good question. Probably not exactly, but maybe cumulatively with other things. I mean, because you kind of create that.
Sort of a little bit, yeah. I think that very strongly that whatever can happen, that's a compromise or a negotiation or discussion, which I'm surprisingly all for. Something needs to happen at that intersection, visually, functionally, structurally, signage, whatever, to stop that right there. Because they're coming in fast down that hill, everybody. And so whatever the mechanism is, I feel very strongly something should happen there, very strongly. And open to what that might be that slows people down or makes it safer to get there.
We were painting the south side of the Masonic Hall when they put out the bump outs. And it was amazing how it slowed everything down. And it was amazing how comfortable I felt crossing that street. And then I'm getting older and slower, and it just made all the difference in the world. So boy, we really need those bump outs.
Any other comments or questions? We're getting close to the end of the hour.
It is great to have little businesses like we have in town right now where we can sit outside in the summer and do all the things that other these cute little, hipster artsy towns are starting to do. They sit out, you have cocktails, you eat out there and don't have tractor trailers screaming by as a plus. It creates a really great feel, makes you want to go back to it, bring your friends, all those things, which all means business for all these businesses that are trying so hard to be on that little itty bitty section of our main street. And I do hope that we're thinking more of the people and the businesses than we are the truck traffic and delivery people. And I know that they're all working hard, but so are these people that are trying to run these businesses. And again, I think that these delivery people will figure out how to get their products where they need to go. They may not like it, but they're on the clock no matter what, so they have to walk a little further to get where they need to go. Nothing's easy.
What scares me is the feed the salad trucks comes through there.
The what?
The feed the salad trucks.
Oh.
All of them. It's terrible. I think they're
I
all,
think they're-
Yep, but they'll have to slow down with the bump-outs.
silage, sap trucks, 18-wheelers. I'm shocked at how fast these 18-wheelers especially makes.
I mean, the more we sit here and talk about it, like if you go back between 2 and 3, like I completely appreciate what the management team was trying to do and like listening to all the feedback and really trying to compromise, but there's a huge difference between 2 and 3.
Yes, sir.
Like just looking at it, like that just feels so much better
Yeah.
than 3. And I completely agree with everything Ellen said, and I just, this might sound really snippy, but I don't know how anybody in their right mind could look at our main street and say, no, it's great, do nothing. Like, something has to be done.
I think safety needs to.
Yeah, that's the
remain thought
biggest thing,
process.
the biggest thing.
Safety, and then
Can you guys do me a favor?
the bonuses
You
it
guys
adds
speak up.
are, yeah.
Speak up, I really want to hear you, I
Safety
can't.
needs to rule the day,
On their thought process, I hope, and this gives them and we got you some more parking spots piece. It just seemed to be the huge thing. I really had to keep for 2.
If you're gonna rip everything up,
Do it once.
do it, because
Absolutely.
I don't think ripping everything up to do less is really a compromise. I don't know. Like I say, like Shauna says, I understand, I totally get what you're trying to do, but it's gonna be a mess for a little while, no matter what it is.
A long one.
I was trying to be optimistic.
No, but it's better, I think it's better to say it's gonna be a long while
Yeah.
and not sell it any other way. It's the outcome, it's the long game. And I'm not a citizen of St. Albans, but go look at St. Albans, they're playing the long game.
And the shorter it seems, logically, the shorter it is, the less people will create a pattern of shopping somewhere else. They'll be like, all right, well, it's gonna be over soon, and we'll get back at it. And people will remain in business, get it done. I couldn't agree more with that.
how long does a project like that take? Is that like a spring to fall?
Oh, you mean to build it?
Yeah, like.
Oh, yeah, you could build it in the summer, but, but it's, it's another, if you were to turn around and go right after funding from the state for engineering, you'd be looking at a couple of years probably for that, and then maybe another couple of years to do construction.
Right, I was just thinking of
Yeah.
downtime for
Yeah.
businesses.
Probably, so there's an engineering phase, right? That's probably a year or 2 to do. Between going after the funding and the time it takes to get the funding, and then they're doing the work and getting there, and then it's probably another couple of years to get that, go from the engineering to the building. Realistically, just given things, you're involving the state is not
Something
moving
at
fast.
5 years, 5 years.
Probably realistically. Might, could it be sooner? Maybe, depends, but,
I was talking about, to clarify, the actual building you said could be done in the building season.
yeah,
Yeah.
you could do the buildings, yeah, absolutely. And obviously, if the town, depending on how ARPA funding comes down, and if the town had a chunk of money in which they were able to just do the work, obviously that eliminates having to go through the grant process and all that sort of stuff. You still have to do the engineering, so that's gonna take some time. But, these things never happen overnight. And we definitely aren't at the phase where you can then talk to the contractor to have start building. We need the engineering and design, and then, more complex things like how do we deal with stormwater, what's gonna need to be done with that, those things need to be worked out, and they can be, because you know as engineers can, but it takes a little time.
I have a question.
Shoot.
So I'm just having a hard time wrapping my mind around the results from the public survey. If the majority of people were in favor of doing nothing, but like a lot of people have said earlier tonight, that there has been a lot of push behind this project, and I don't know, I guess I'm just confused as to how it's possible on the survey that most people said to do nothing when typically in my experience, it's the people who oppose a project that are most vocal.
Right, and I think that's what you have here. That's my take, and I also will say that I do think we have to recognize that we're in a very trying time right now, and so, communities that may have been really excited about something are awfully tired at this point in time. And so that changes people's sort of attitude and responsiveness to these things. And, it may very well be that a vast majority of the people who were involved in the larger Vital Village process are busy dealing with stuff and didn't have time to give this their capacity and think about it and participate in this. My experience is if you have, every project takes needs to have a champion, and we had Matt Miner in the beginning. He left, and John did an admirable job filling in for him, but John was trying to run your village, and so you didn't have that person who's willing to go out and sort of bang on people's doors and harass them to come be involved. And so we sort of got the few people we got who participated. I hear you. It was very surprising to see such sort of opposite
Right,
response.
Even for the people who showed up today for the informational meeting, if we were to do a straw vote and just see, I'd be willing to bet that 60% of the people wouldn't say do nothing.
Yep.
So I just, I'm having a hard time, I guess, taking this.
I can tell you I just got on the trustees not that long ago. I didn't hear anything about the whole Vital Village thing before that. And when they started doing the survey, I tried to get as many people to take the survey as possible. The majority of the feedback I was getting from them was do nothing.
What kind of rationale were they giving for doing nothing?
They didn't. It's probably like everything else. People have a hard time dealing with change. So it's going to be something different. And you got to get over that first hurdle of, okay, here's something different. You're going to learn to like it.
So if they truly feel that way, where are they tonight?
Sorry?
I said, where are they tonight?
Right.
I think we have to acknowledge that there was a campaign to do nothing, and there was outreach by a person or persons to get that out there. And I think, you can look at situations, and you have that vocal minority. And I watched a school board meeting the other night, and people came to oppose a direction that the school board was taking. And I think there was loads of people supporting the direction the school board was taking, but didn't think they needed to be there or they needed to speak up. And I think a lot of people with this are like, like you said, I'm busy, I support it, yada, yada, and then, all these people came out and said, no, well, geez, I should have participated that time. And I'm guilty of that too. There's only so many meetings you can go to. You pick the meetings you can't go to, and maybe you should have been there. I don't know.
The Vital Village, that was like 18 months, right? That process, at least.
Yeah.
If there were people really committed to that, that's a long time to be really committed to something. And after a while, you get sort of planning burnout.
Yeah.
And maybe there's some of those folks just weren't up for it.
Often it's going to take another 5 years.
Right.
Speaking to the Vital Village, too, is it didn't take it to the level of specificity that
Right.
the scoping study did. And so the initial survey was done on a visioning survey. And so we didn't have a survey of people at the end. But I'd say the public involvement for the Vital Village was strong and throughout the entire process that led to the ultimate recommendation to look at a scoping study for improvements in the village center. But, I mean, I was surprised as anyone to sort of see the strong opposition in this most recent.
And sometimes it is about the, oh, we like the idea of it, but when you show them the reality, that changes people's perspective. Because I mean, this is the first survey we did. This was when we asked people, what do you want? And I mean, we still look at this, I mean, everybody's like, yes, please, to all of the potential things we were talking about throwing out there. But, and admittedly, it was probably a different group of people who responded on both sides, but you do have different opinions, obviously.
I didn't fill out a survey. I don't even, do you have a copy of the survey you put up?
I don't know which one,
Well, the one that just happened, the most recent one that we're discussing right now.
I don't know if that's still.
It was online based.
Yeah.
If you go to the Facebook page for the village, it may be on there, she did post it on there a couple times.
But it's closed, so you can't open it up
But you can't
anymore.
open it anymore?
Yeah, I mean.
When we vote for something, it doesn't matter, it's not gonna be etched in stone. So if we vote for 3 or 2, it still can be modified, as long as we have a plan in place. We don't lose our scoping, redo our scoping all over again when we do it down the road, right?
Exactly. You guys can leave the, I mean, remember, the outcome of this is just a report. But it's a report that makes V-Trans happy, they feel like you've done your due diligence. You could certainly, I think, go to them and have a reasonable discussion down the road that says, okay, you know, we like parts of 3 and parts of 2, and so we'd like to try to figure out how to put both of those together. I don't know whether they'd want you to have some other additional work done. Probably, I don't think that's necessary. I think you just have to agree on what you're trying to do. And then you can apply for funding to do that, you know. So I mean, I think don't feel like you're completely constrained by recommending option 2 or option 3. In the end, it's just, this is what we recommend after the outcome of this process. And we can even acknowledge in the thing that there may be, in the future, the town may want to actually consider doing some of the things from, other parts. I would say that one of the things that I would think you guys would want to do, and this is my personal recommendation as a planner, is I think there needs to be more conversation about this to really find out, well, what do people want? And I don't know whether that's something you might be able to work with the Regional Planning Commission on or something like that to kind of do a little more engagement around this before you take a step of trying to actually seek the funding to do the engineering or something like that. You know what I mean? Just because I'm like you, I'm looking at this going, well, we got love it, hate it, where are we? I mean, chances are we're somewhere in the middle.
If I
Go back to the blue draft. Sam, it is interesting, can you go back to the blue, the all blue, the other survey?
Yep.
That
make sure that.
of the alternatives, the number 3, the access 1 that we're talking about, 50 hating it is less than the 55 and 65 hating the other 2.
Right.
And 17 liking it went substantially more than liking either of the other 2.
Right.
Like, it was very clearly among the people who were considering the question more so than do nothing, it was the very clear winner.
Right, and I mean, remember too, we have, this is very opposed, this is very in favor, and so you have a spectrum in the middle here. And I mean, 18 plus 6.4 plus 11.7, I don't do math that well in my head, but I mean, you have, so that's 20, 30, so it's close to 40% of the folks here were at least comfortable with the idea.
46.8.
Thank you.
Sam, I can't obviously speak for the do nothing people, because I'm not that person, but I was on that April 28th Zoom meeting, and at that time in that conversation, there was really conversation about 2 projects. One of them, which we discussed at the last trustees meeting, and I really feel like it got clouded. Like the differential in the line between the 2 projects, and I really feel like that do nothing, I don't know how much of that was really directed and how much of a clear line people really understood the difference between those 2 projects.
Right.
That could have something to do with it. Again, I can't speak for that, that's just my hypothesis.
But it could be hard to differentiate. perpetuate improvements.
Right, exactly.
I'm flummoxed like you are. It's a stark number, you know, it hits it right across. You can't ignore it. I think, and I think Susie's comment makes sense to me. And Shauna does as well. If you do reflect back to that hybrid, was it hybrid or was all Zoom? when we were
It was
on?
Zoom.
It was all Zoom on the
Yeah.
screen, yeah. And it was clear some people hadn't attended before and haven't attended since. On that screen, I could see the screen, you know, when it was there. They were on that, but we're in it again. They haven't been back again. And I think the timing of the survey, the confusion, and the campaign have to speak to that number because I got a stack of articles this big about this thing going on in Enosburg, right? In the Messenger. Everybody talking about this for 2 years. So it hasn't been, you know, subterfuge or, you know, only the chosen few.
Everybody moves.
Did it. It's Harvest Fest, which is a wide open, you know. That's the only, but I just, I'm not blowing smoke, I'm flummoxed by that number, but then if I hear those things, I start to get closer to understanding it. Not there still. I think a lot of us, I didn't fill out the survey, I don't live here. I didn't feel like that was reasonable or something, I really felt that was a citizen survey. But I also think that a lot of our folks that were supportive of it didn't pay attention to it. And that's on us, that you know, we got lazy.
They might have thought they didn't have anything to worry about, so they didn't do it.
Right, yeah. But you still got that big number and you can't ignore it. I want to be, you can analyze it, but you can't say it's nothing. It'd be wrong.
So we do have the good momentum that's been going on for years, like you say. So what do we do with this? And none of us here really agrees that doing nothing is a great idea. And we're here. So what do we do?
What are the next steps?
So I just have one more question. I guess this is more geared towards the management team. Is the number 2 alternative, the reduced one, kind of, I guess, was the do nothing aspect factored in heavily to the access alternative to make the number 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
as I said at the beginning of the conversation, you know, the whole reason that we continued to meet was because of all of the negative feedback we got starting with the April 28th meeting. Remember, originally this project was scheduled to end July 30th. That's when this project was supposed to be done. And after the April 28th meeting, the management team was kind of a little, I think it's fair to say, caught off guard. We were not anticipating all of the negative reaction that we got at the April 28th public hearing. And after that, we had some, you know, very long and serious discussions within the management team about how to move this forward, because it suddenly seemed like everyone in the community had turned against this project. We had really, as I recall, only a few people in attendance at that meeting that said positive things about it. The vast majority of comments were very, very negative. So we stepped back and we met either 2 or 3 times after that April 28th meeting to sort of compose ourselves and figure out, okay, what should we do now? D&K was involved in all of those discussions. They agreed that they were willing to stay with this project for a longer period of time. And we ended up coming up with the idea of doing another public survey to really get a gauge for, okay, was that just a one-time weird thing? Or is this real? Do people in this community really not want us to go any further with this Vital Village project? So we did that. D&K, to their credit, even though they had other projects lined up, agreed to stay with us. We worked out a new schedule which extended the project about 3 more months in order to do this additional piece and then have follow-up meetings with our Board of Trustees. One of these is tonight. And we did really take very serious consideration over the results of that public survey once it was completed. We felt we had to. You know, we felt we had an obligation. We took all that time and effort to do it. We extended the length of the project, and we felt like, you know, if we just ignored that, we wouldn't be doing very good public service. We had to at least take it into consideration and have some serious discussions. So I guess in a long-winded way, I'm saying, yes, I think that, you know, going from option 2 to option number 3, and why did the recommendation of the management team ultimately become option 3 was mostly because of the feedback that we got in the public survey process.
And this reduced alternative 2, that's part of the thing. Okay, let's look at a smaller piece of it, and then let's try to make sure we're looking at enhancing parking. And that was sort of this particular approach.
Yeah, and as I said, this was kind of a compromise, trying to be fair to what we saw in the results of the survey, but also, you know, not wanting to give up completely on everything. We like yourselves, felt too like, you know, do nothing is not really the result we want to see out of this. So let's try and find the pieces of this that will at least keep some of the basic parts of what we thought we were going to do originally in the plan. And a lot of those were centered around pedestrian safety issues. And so although we ended up scaling a lot of things back, we did still put in bump outs, we put in truck aprons. We tried to pay attention to the parking issues because that seemed, you know, the most glaring issue, I think, as everybody said here, regarding the opposition to the project. So in number 3, we didn't reduce any parking. The parking would remain on Main Street as it is, and it would remain on Depot Street as it is. But we still were able to work in some of the other pedestrian safety issues that people were concerned about.
And one of the things too to note that you guys don't see here, we were looking at the reduced version of it. A lot of what we proposed to do in the Depot Street area would have taken away parking, because so much needs to be done there to really make that a safer place to walk. That there was, I think, you know, a significant hit on parking. That's one of the reasons we said, all right, we're just not going to put that parking and not change that. So.
Yeah, so the only thing on Depot that the management team recommends in the letter to the trustees is to put a new crosswalk in that would be basically in the vicinity of around where the American Legion is. It would connect the rail trail at that point to the municipal parking lot on the opposite side of the street next to the Opera House. And that's the only change that we're recommending along Depot Street.
I think, you know, one thing that's struck me about this is if you don't implement the change in the street, you still got to do the one-way look on Main Street. You know, do all that. This would only be a partial, hopefully partial, some stuff we did.
Okay.
There's nothing.
In for a penny, in for a pound. So, the only facts that exist about parking is what you can count today and what you can count in number 2. The rest is all supposition. It's not a fact. And I think the confusion, both the confusion and the hyperbole, Ward spoke at a previous meeting about another project that he's never in 40 years been able to come downtown and not find a place to park, to do something downtown. There are business people who could be here talking about active retail spaces, but we have a lot of empty space, and we have a lot of space that's not retail. And I can always find a place to park in Enosburg when I come, regardless of the time of day. And so there's not a parking crunch now that exists. You'd love to have that parking crunch. It would tell you that you've got active businesses, whatever they might be downtown, bringing people in. Well, you know, we talk about parking and this sensitivity about it, but we're not talking about numbers, we're talking about feeling and suppositions. Again, not about, oh, they're full out, they're always full 100% of the time, we know that for a fact. So we can't, there's going to be no more business activity here because we can't have anybody, we can't do that, you know.
So, as I say, in my experience, you know, years ago when I was working for the Regional Planning Commission, I helped Chelsea with their zoning. We ended up doing away with their parking requirements because they were literally making it so that new businesses couldn't develop because of required spaces in front of the buildings. And there was a lot of people sort of panicking about that idea, and then ultimately what was discovered was they really didn't have the parking problem because the reality is that a couple blocks down there's all the spaces. So often there are, I think, is a perception that it's worse than it is. That said, the way to really get to that is to do a parking study. People do them, they're not outrageous. Again, the Regional Commission might be able to help you either do one or get you funding to do one. You know, I'm actually in the process of hoping to buy the equipment to be able to do them for my team. And you know, let's get a count. You know, then you have numbers to basically say, look, over this period of time, we're not seeing that there is in fact a parking shortage. Or you could say, well, these people are right. There is a parking shortage. We are all very used to wanting to park right in front of the place we're trying to go. And while that's important, I think, for people who have access issues, most of us can walk into it. And if there are spaces available, then it's less of an issue. But again, the best way to deal with it is to actually do the analysis.
And number two, adds parking spaces, that's downtown. Enosburg adds. I mean, it's like.
What's interesting is those people that talk about not having a place to park, they can't wait to get to those little places to go shop. And still park 2 streets over to get to that interesting parking, or that interesting shopping section, or all of those things. We can be those things. We try it and learn to adapt. It seems as though you're just pointing out that people learn to adapt. In a situation where the parking was elsewhere, they adapted.
We've gone over that time. Yeah, I'm picking up a lot of your time. I know you guys have to do business.
Can I just say that with complete and full, utter, total due respect to the management team that was made very rational decisions with the letter that they wrote, it has been said today that this project needs a champion, and it can be you guys. You guys can decide right now that, with all due respect to the management team, if we're gonna tear up Main Street, why don't we do the full thing and not the minimal thing? And the power is with you right now to see what our village could be. And as we clearly know, it's not gonna be next year, or really even the year after that. So, yeah, I think that's where we're at now. That we need somebody to see a vision of what we could be, and not live in, like he was saying, well, change is scary, and so do nothing.
All right. Is there anybody else?
Wish you luck.
With that?
I wish you luck,
Thank you.
Hey, what goes on next? What is the next? Pardon?
Yeah, we have a couple park permits and stuff. But yeah, so if there's agendas up on the table there, people
want to see what else is on the meeting? Or was she asking next for that subject?
I think she went to next.
I think she's asking next for that.
In the vital village?
Oh,
Yes.
So, I mean, we'll wrap up our report at this point with the alternative 3 as the preferred alternative in the report.
When will we know what you've decided?
Technically, that's up to the village trustees. They can either opt to leave it as it is or do something. It's their.
Yeah, the
Are you
board,
deciding tonight?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We need to have a discussion about it for sure.
Yeah.
We haven't had a chance to talk to each other at all.
Yep. I would say it would be, from my perspective, it would be helpful to know what, if things were gonna change sooner than later, only because we gotta write the final report, finish the report.
so Chris is reminding us that we do have a deadline here.
It doesn't have to be
Which is, it's coming up though, it's October 31st.
Right.
Is the new date that V-Trans agreed to give us for an extension on this.
October 31st?
October 31st. So, if you guys want, we did talk about maybe having Chris come back to do just one more wrap-up, not a long extended session like this, but sort of one last summary with you guys.
Right.
And
That the intention is to present the final report at that point, to say here it is, any questions.
So
But-
if there was any modifications that the board would want to make tonight would be the time to do it?
I don't know, when are you guys meeting next?
28th.
I mean, if it didn't happen until the 28th, that's not gonna be a crisis. I mean, if you guys wanna think about it, if you could do it by then, though, that would help us, because then we'd have, the only thing is that, I guess the question is, how soon do we need to, we need to know by the 28th, so then, because we're gonna have to flip a draft around and give it to V-Trans to review, in addition to everybody. And they always block when you don't give them enough time.
So theoretically, not to hold anything up, but if we wanted to pick and choose, go through 2 and 3 and put together what the board sees as the best option, we could do that and submit it back.
Yeah, I think we can work with that, yeah. And at the very, I think we can do that.
I mean, now I guess is the good time to ever, I don't want to push the chairs together.
It would be nice to be a little bit closer.
What was that?
I don't know.
Well, now we can, if the projector's not an issue.
Thank you guys for reconfiguring for me.
All right.
We good like this, or do you want to move it any differently?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my main take back from this is there are people that are gonna disagree with doing something, whether it be what the people want or what is a watered down version of that, I guess. So I don't know. I think it definitely begs the question to ask if number 2 or number 3 could either be chosen. I know the management team had suggested 3, but I feel like if we're gonna get yelled at for doing something, we're gonna get yelled at no matter what we do.
Right.
Whether it be what we want or what happens.
I like 3 personally due to ease of maintenance.
Mhm.
Number 2 is going to add, it doesn't look like much, but it's gonna add a lot of work for those guys in the wintertime, trying to keep that clean, and then all you're gonna do is have people complaining that, oh, there's slush, and I can't walk from my car to the sidewalk. And
Right. That's not your Okay, so I personally think Jim raised a good point about having the bump outs close on the ends,
Yes.
and it will slow down everything in the middle. So Eli, I think the bulk of the maintenance is gonna be right in front of the pearly block and right in front of the notch.
get that picture going.
On number, so we'll go over to number 2 to get the most like extreme version of that. And if you look at the difference between 2 and 3, basically right in front of the pearly block, we're talking. 2 has a bump out, an extended bump out, that I personally don't think needs to be there, and that would contribute to a lot of maintenance hassle.
Where are you at?
It's right here.
Yeah.
So,
The 2 at Notch and Pearly, or the 1 at each, Notch and
right, so
Pearly.
Pearly, it's my opinion that I would just scrub that one all together and then just cut down the tail of the notch
Mhm.
on the south side. cut that tail in half and get rid of Curly Road altogether, and the maintenance would go down substantially.
Thank you all.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for your time, appreciate it.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, Sam, and I've been having this,
All right, we'll see you, Chris. Have a good night.
I was having some of the similar thoughts of like the outer parts of of 2 I really liked, and like the inner middle part of 3 could be like a hybrid
Exactly, yeah.
option, because it still slows traffic down.
Yep.
And there's still opportunity for more crosswalk access. And I think Gary made a good point. A lot of people don't use crosswalks. I mean, that's been my personal experience, seeing a lot of people jaywalking. But there's no difference in how safe it is on walking on a crosswalk versus not in downtown Enosburg. But I think if you make a big difference about it, people will start being retrained.
Does anybody know how Newport does such a beautiful job of crosswalk enforcement?
Funding.
Okay, because you drive down Newport Main Street and there isn't a car that doesn't stop.
Yeah, you know how much money our state government has poured into Newport over the last 2 decades? I mean, it's
Yeah, because this,
like Winooski too.
yeah,
They've, our state really has poured just millions and millions of dollars into downtown Winooski. They did the same in Newport.
but what is it that makes the difference? It's still a crosswalk, and there's not a cop standing on it making people stop. I mean, what did they manage to do that makes the driver know that he's coming to a dead stop because somebody stepped out on the crosswalk? They're painted just like ours are.
Do they have the
No,
flashing?
you'd have to-
Do they have the
you can't
flashing
picture
crosswalk
them all
signs?
exactly
No, I mean, and
like
I'm going back 25 years probably, and I mean it was that way then. It's really kind of incredible. You can just step out in the street and traffic stops.
I think right now the whole deal with the jaywalkers is you have to run across the entire length of pavement, whether or not you're on a crosswalk or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you have bump outs, then you're halfway there.
Yeah.
So it may make people more apt to use the crosswalk.
The crosswalk, because
Yeah.
it looks
Run across
safer
town.
here, yeah.
And it really, and it just highlights walk here.
Yeah. So I personally would like to go with like a number 2, but edited slightly.
Yeah, I wrote 2.5 on my paperwork.
Yeah.
And I would be in support of that. I know what the survey says, but I don't know.
We need to do something, and yeah, I think this even will do stuff towards the aesthetics as well. Just having this more green space, just less concrete, less road space visible in the downtown. Yeah, slowing traffic would be amazing, and then slower traffic, they'll stop more.
And the more parking spaces, who's gonna argue with that? You know, at that point, it's,
So you're saying basically add the spaces in front of the health center?
so basically go with number 2. I like that, well, yeah, so just get rid of this whole thing.
So the only problem I see with cutting that off is if somebody's pulling it out of here, they're still gonna have to go way out to get around the car that's parked here.
Well, yeah,
At that point,
so see how this one has just a little tiny bump out already? So we use the bump out in front of Notch on the south side from the number 3.
number 3 is not okay.
It does a little bit, it's got a little tiny tail. You can barely see it. Well, see where that orange dot is?
Yeah.
Like right around there. So basically use that, and then, and use this bump out from number 2 in front of the Pearly block. But everything else remains number 2. 2.
Well, you'd have to, I don't think, even with this mountable truck apron, they're still gonna be driving over that grass constantly. Trucks still get stuck in the notch.
I have a CDL. I drive big rigs every day, and I go down that road almost every day that I'm driving. I am well aware of what that intersection is. I haven't had an issue with it yet. Typically, you
I
use
feel
other
like you're a
lanes.
capable truck driver. I saw a guy get stuck trying to turn around in McDermott's yard. He got wedged across 105 with his tractor off the far side by the sidewalk.
Right.
So I mean, This is the kind of people we deal with.
There's always a deck here and there that's a couple cars short, and that,
Oh, yeah,
you know,
you're
it doesn't
short.
just apply to truck drivers, but yeah, I think it definitely needs to be mountable, for sure.
Same with. by
Because
the-
if you're
by
gonna
the,
squeeze that in, it's either you're taking up space on the opposite side of Main Street, or you're taking up space on the opposite side of Depot. When, you know, you gotta swing that turn wide to cut it in.
I wish I had scissors. So I could like cut stuff out and put them together.
What's
Can I
up?
make a technical note now, is that okay?
Yeah,
Just if you're looking at making a proposed combination of improvement from 2 and 3, I don't have the map in front of me, but I would just caution to make sure that the change to the bump out in 2 doesn't impact the ability to have the pull-in parking in front of the notch. Because, so that's just.
yes, so,
Because you would still have to change the traffic pattern to get them over far enough.
Because just because we went through lots of discussions around how to minimize or not minimize.
yeah,
And, you know, taking out the bump outs in between or kind of near the early block was one suggestion because it wasn't a crossing, a pedestrian crossing. But in the end, in order to take those out, they had to take out that entire block because of they took out the vertical. The ability to have the pull-in parking as opposed to the parallel frontage.
but you could still make the number 2 access reduced with the number 3 truck aprons though, right? Like have the bump out the same size, but use an apron instead of a hard curb.
Aprons, yes.
Yes, so that would be fine.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I would also recommend that as well, because, I mean, if anyone's been through Jeff at the roundabout there, they have hard curbs, and right-hand turns from 108 to 15 is,
Total disaster.
people in cars wouldn't necessarily know this, but I hit that curb pretty much every time. You gotta go all the way around the roundabout.
The last
and
time I went, we watched a tractor trailer truck get hung up in it and then sit there and spin wheels in the air figuring out how the hell he was gonna get out.
So a truck apron on Depot Street, plus the reduced size bump out in front of the notch, and using number 3's bump out for in front of the Pearly block, I think.
I feel like they got it licked with number 3 personally. Like just that.
But the problem with,
combining
I don't think number 3 does quite enough for,
it doesn't give you the parking spaces.
yeah.
We're not losing any. We're just not gaining any.
But we're hoping down the road to need some as
Right,
well. I mean,
right.
I think our hope and our dream
And if
for
we
Main
did that,
Street is
you're
that
not
it's
talking
going
about
to grow.
Tearing up the whole of Main Street, you only have to tear up in front of those 2 buildings.
Yeah, one other thing I'll just remind the board, I said this earlier in the meeting, but just so you're aware, the criticism from those that were opposed to doing anything on Main Street wasn't just the number of parking spaces, but they were also concerned about having the ability to have delivery trucks and stuff pull up, and that was part of their concern about the bump outs and, you know, the style of bump outs that we had. They were actually still, I think, concerned, even under proposal number 3, that the bump outs might be disruptive, but the management team felt like we had curbed them back enough that, you know, they were acceptable to us anyway.
And
But I'm just letting you know that that's gonna be one of the criticisms from folks that were opposed to moving forward with anything, is that it's not just a number of spaces. They're also concerned about delivery trucks' abilities to pull into these areas in the morning, and they're concerned that the size of these bump outs are gonna prevent that.
And the trucks have no alternative. It's the only way they can make deliveries on Main Street anymore. With the loading dock and the spaces in the back of the new block completely gone forever, the trucks have no choice. And I think pedestrian safety is extremely important as well. But the lifeblood of some of these businesses is being able to get their deliveries. So I think that giving them some breathing space is important too.
I think the management team did really well taking everybody's concerns into consideration and kind of blending everything together. And like I said, if we ever did run into an issue of needing more parking places, you're only talking about in front of those 2 buildings.
So that is kind of along the lines of what I was talking about, and when I asked how heavily the factor of do nothing was weighed into this project. Because if, whether or not you put a bump out that's 1 foot by 1 foot in either, any one of these spaces, like minimal impact, it's still doing something in which somebody's not gonna like.
Right.
Oh,
So
for
that's,
sure.
that's why, like the difference between 2 and 3, if the decision from the survey was weighed into number 2, to water it down to the extent where it's not really worth, I'm not saying it's not worth doing, but, it wouldn't be what people want. Whether, because right now we got a polarized thing, it's either do nothing or do something. And whether that something is what people want or a watered down version of that is what I'm concerned about. You know what I mean? I think the parking spaces, nobody's gonna argue with that, and all the things that go along with it are kind of necessary.
And it slows traffic down at that point of Main Street.
It's a pinch point, and all those people with their Mustangs and stuff out front of, in that intersection won't be able to do all the stuff they
And when
normally
the
do.
trucks are doing their delivery, it'll be slow enough and safer for pedestrians.
And I don't see any
You're talking
major
about down by the
changes.
liquor store?
Well, if we squeeze traffic here and we squeeze traffic here, they're gonna be slower through here.
Right.
So when
in
there's trucks
number
parked
3,
on the
you already are
road,
squeezing traffic in both places.
not nearly as
Squeezing
much.
it there, and you're squeezing it there still.
Not nearly as much.
Right,
The
it's
length
not-
into the street on these bump outs didn't look like it changed that much.
It does. There's 7 crosswalks on one and 6 on the other, so it must be
There's
out
also-
another foot and a half.
It says there's 3 spots and there's 4, so I don't think any of this is to scale.
It'd be 7 versus 4.
Well, it says 3, so how many spots is there?
There's 4 currently.
So why does it say there's only 3?
Maybe, I don't know.
Because it's not to scale?
Oh, maybe the south end of that isn't a spot. Maybe it tapers down to nothing. So maybe there are only 3 actual parking spots.
2, 3, I mean, they're clearly drawn out.
Yeah,
4.
are you guys talking about in front of the notch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 3 existing, but remember they're parallel, aren't
Yeah, but they drew out 4,
parallel?
so
Yeah, parallel parking.
how much of this is actually to scale?
So you're saying
Yeah, they're
on
showing us
3,
4.
they're
1,
showing
2,
4,
3,
1,
4.
4 in the
3,
drawing, but
4.
it says
If you
there's
count
3.
the little
1,
white
2, 3,
lines.
4.
And if you're counting
Yeah.
little white lines,
Well, you're right, and maybe they were off some, but it does say 3 existing.
right.
So I think that's what we gotta go
How many
for,
are
is
there
3
That's
existing.
what I want. I don't know.
Yeah,
I never paid
It
attention.
must
I feel
be
like
3 then.
I feel like they would be more like 3 in my memories.
No, there must be a set of the striped
One.
lines.
I mean, you're right, it does show 4 there, but it says 3 existing on both plans.
Well, look at
So I think we have to go with 3 existing.
the south side though. That I don't want to get hung up on this parking spot, but I don't think they classify that as a spot where the half the car is on the south side because it like tapers down to nothing. So maybe they're not calling that. It's not a hard like rectangular spot. Just like how in the front there's a triangle. In the back that's a triangle spot too. I don't know, but
Yeah.
either way, yeah, there must be 3.
I would go with the written as opposed to what's shown on the
Right, so then you
map.
can't really argue the crosswalk spaces because who knows how many crosswalk spaces there actually are. I'm all for necking down traffic there. I just think that they're probably both the same
Yeah.
size
Right.
neck.
But the only difference is one has the truck
One has a
aprons.
chicane and one has not.
Right. But I
Well,
will
and
say
then
though,
in front of Bond, it comes out a little further, number 2.
but as far as delivery trucks go, even the difference
I'm not
between
opposed
2
to
and
that.
3, it doesn't look like there's much of a change to the bump outs for right in front of that retail space. So the trucks that are gonna be doing deliveries are in front of the liquor store and right across the street. And
Yep.
those 2 bump outs look fairly similar between the 2 proposed projects.
Yeah, they're pretty close.
And if we really needed to, we could put truck aprons on the very tips of all of these bump outs and they would still classify as bump outs, right? Greta, you may be able to answer this. So if we leave the existing bump outs but have the tips of them, so the furthest most spot towards the road.
Here,
Right.
come see us.
So if
Please.
we were to just leave these and put like a truck apron on each tip that sticks out, would that be fine? Would it still classify as a bump out? Because this is gonna be a hard curb, I'm assuming.
That would be a hard curve.
So theoretically, I think if you were coming off this
I
road
think
with
you
tractor trailer.
could, I think you could technically make that a mountable curve.
Because that would be, right, so yeah, basically what we're proposing is have this, that,
Okay.
that's good, but everything else number 2.
Okay, so I think that they have an issue, and so you were proposing to reduce that, because they
Yeah.
have an issue with making sure that the access to that driveway is the same,
Yeah.
bumping out the same on either side.
Yep.
So you're not creating a site distance.
You won't be able to,
So these could be mountable on each end, theoretically, and still have a classified as bump out.
And so the other thing that, just to note that this does, is it creates the chicane.
Yep.
So by eliminating this, you eliminate that chicane feature.
Okay, I thought this was here just to give space out for those spots, so it's not such an abrupt.
I think that's part of it, but there's sort of like dual sort of impacts there to that
kind of
design.
like going through the middle of Swanton where there's a parking lot in the middle of the road.
Yeah, that's.
What is going on?
That is confusing.
Okay, so
So I think, yes, talk to, I think I'd be interested from an engineering perspective on a mountable curb on the bump outs, but I think that you can create like mountable curbs that are with brick inlay that sort of still are
Yeah.
attractive, but that are mountable.
agreed.
From a maintenance perspective, and that may need to be replaced more going, so that's sort of something to factor in. The longevity of inlaid brick may not be the same, but you could also do sort of stamped brick concrete, so that it looks like brick, but it's not real brick. So I think that so you can look into the alternatives of different mountable, sorry, I'm not talking to everyone, curb options.
Yeah, from a maintenance standpoint, I would assume that it would be much easier to maintain a street with mountable curbs rather than hard
And then
curbs.
another thing to talk to Chris about is, one of the point that was made is that, choosing, if you choose access to, some of these design specifics can get sorted out in the next phase of the project.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Greta. I don't know if you guys want to try and nail down, if you're thinking about doing some kind of hybrid between 2 and 3, I think maybe if you just make note of the areas that you would like to try and do some kind of amalgamation with, and then that gives you that, you've sort of earmarked it, and that gives you the flexibility, once we get into an engineering study, to go back and revisit that in higher detail with an engineering firm.
And they might have ideas we can't think of.
Right, because if we were to go
Yeah,
through
we
a
haven't
bump
built
out
too
to
many
bump
streets.
out, whether or not it has a truck apron or not, doesn't make any difference right now. That's a technical.
Can I ask a question? Why at that particular bump out location are you interested in the truck apron? Are you concerned about?
Depot and Main, that would need
Sorry, not Depot, Maine, I know there, but
Oh.
I should
By the
know
parallel
that.
block?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking if it sticks out too far, if you hit it, whether or not it's a hard curb, it's gonna make a big difference whether or not it's mountable, whether a hard curb. Because if you're just, not saying people are gonna be going down Main Street not paying attention, but it could happen, and a bump out kind of comes out of nowhere and you hit it with your tire, it's gonna really
Wreck some
jolt
stuff.
you, and I think
Probably
that's,
going too fast, but no.
right. You're obviously not paying attention, you're probably going too fast.
We're not gonna
but
cure
still,
that tomorrow.
Whether or not you drive over and, oh geez, there's a bump out there, or bang, and then you're, damage to your car.
Blowing your tire.
Right, that's what comes to my mind,
Mhm.
but,
Yeah, and I'm sure there's examples of communities that have mountable truck aprons. I haven't seen a lot of visuals myself, but I'm sure they're out there, so that's something that you can consider.
or I need to get this delivery, there's this one car parked in the
Not
middle of all
mountable
this.
truck out, multiple bump.
The truck could theoretically drive on the bump out if it's mountable to make their delivery. But if it's a hard curb, they couldn't.
That's I think a useful piece of information relating to the number 2.
Right, so I guess from what I'm thinking is we kind of accept number 2, a variation of, and we can make these little adjustments as we go. They'd all be technical at that point.
Right, so just so I understand, the areas that you would like to consider, just so Chris can start preparing to write this up for his final report with you guys, is you'd like to do some kind of hybrid between 2 and 3 at the intersection of Main and Depot. and then also some kind of hybrid between 2 and 3 at the intersection of Main and Missisquoi Street. Is that correct?
Number 3's got it pretty well licked. You can pinch it a little bit harder on the east side, but
Okay, so,
for me, like, I think we're not losing any parking places. We might need parking places 10 years from now, but we deal with it 10 years from now. We make some changes without making drastic changes that people may be opposed to. If you're worried about speed and stuff, you got a pinch point here, pinch it a little bit tighter up here, like is it number 2, but to heck with all that extra bump out and angled parking.
Yeah, I mean, I see number 3 is better than nothing, but I feel like number 2 is a little closer to what's been envisioned through the whole process.
And that's where I think going back to the whole, people are gonna be mad whether or not we do number 2 or 3. It's either, at this point, it's binary, either it's gonna be no or it's gonna be yes, and for me that, I don't wanna water the project down to the point where it's not what people wanted, just because people say they didn't want anything. You know what I mean? I don't know, so I guess going from here, we gotta figure out whether or not we want 2 or 3, or a variation of either. So Eli thinking
Eli
3.
seems to favor more 3, and Sam, you seem to be championing more 2.
I would like a
with
variation of 2.
variation of something on those 2 intersections on 2.
I think it's hard to argue with the extra spaces.
I agree.
That's what I say.
I might agree that I might want to, if it's possible, water a couple of spots of 2 down a little bit,
Yes,
but keep the bulk of it.
that's kind of where I'm leaning.
That's where I'm at.
So I guess I could suggest then, either you can take a vote now. You don't have, well, you have a quorum, but we are missing one person.
And we're missing one
So-
person's voice.
It could, you could still end up with a majority on one side or the other, though, depending on how the vote went. Or you could end up in a deadlock, 2 against 2, because there's an even number of you here. Or we could, if you would like, we could take a little more time and put this on the September 28th agenda and.
But knowing we have to have a decision that night.
By then,
Well, yeah, Chris had
Yes,
said he'd really
has
like
to
to
be by
know
that
by
night.
the 28th.
And I think Leonard's
where you
input
guys were leaning with this.
should be accounted for as well.
Leonard's
That'd
been on
give
the
us
board
time
for a
to
long
mull
time.
this over.
He deserves to be able to have a voice.
But I say make notes on what you would like to see changed, think about it before the next meeting, and we'll make a hard decision on what exactly we want to see.
And will there be, because there'll be 2 weeks, there'll be opportunity for more public comment?
I guess in the meantime, yeah. Is it gonna be an agenda item?
Well, yeah, I think you'd want to have this as an agenda item.
Yeah, okay. And I guess at that point, there would be more room for comment.
We could write something like, review of scoping study alternatives by the Board of Trustees, something like that.
Okay.
Okay. I think that sounds like the best course of action at this time.
Okay, so.
It's a
schedule
tough
this.
decision, however we look at it. It's
Yeah.
not an easy thing.
For sure.
Yeah, okay, so schedule this for the 28th.
Would Chris want to be there for that?
I'll certainly let him know. I don't know if he'll have time to be there or not, but if you like, I can suggest that if he can be there, the board would like to hear any feedback he has.
You're able to provide a great way of getting some participation by consultants that have.
Yeah, can we have a hybrid?
Yep, that'd be great.
Yeah, hybrid enough. Yeah, we could run it by him. I think.
Yeah, Ken Santamore was doing a Zoom for us, as you recall. He's not a village employee. We have some training in Zoom within the current staff. So we'd have to see. I could talk to Ken and see if he'd be willing to come in and set up the Zoom and monitor and manage the Zoom option for us on the 28th, if that's something you want.
We won't know if we don't ask him.
Yeah. I think it'd be very helpful and open to other participants.
Okay.
Might be a can of worms, but you know, hey, we have to eat everything. Yep.
Yeah, how would that work? We would have to have that,
To do a hybrid, I don't know, we haven't done a hybrid before, we've done one or the other, we've done
The
all
trust,
Zoom
the select
or
board does
all
hybrid.
in attendance, so.
Shauna,
I'd have
we
to-
do hybrids every time. Do we have difficulties?
Well, we don't do it, I think, quite the way you
Well, no,
would want
Shauna
to
uses,
do it,
John,
that you-
we use a phone.
Yeah, that you would want to do it here.
But Sean
Right.
has a special
Right,
camera.
the owl.
Select board
So we should be
definitely has
able
done
to
it.
consult with the select board for some support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I would talk with Ken Sanamore, he does our IT for the village, he's not a village employee, he's an employee of Vermont Public Power Supply Authority, but as part of our membership to Vermont Public Power Supply Authority, Ken Sanamore has acted also as our IT specialist.
Well, if he's an IT specialist, I'm sure he can do hybrid as well as he can do straight Zoom.
If we got the equipment, I just
Yeah.
don't know what equipment is needed.
If we have to borrow
do
the
it.
owl, maybe we can borrow it.
But I can talk to him about it and see, what, I don't even know if he's available that night or not, so I can talk to him and see, if he can do it.
One step at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we all set on that item for now? All right. So now we'll move on to Lincoln Park permit request and update for Enosburg Business Association Harvest Fest.
Okay, so the board will see the two remaining permits
gonna
that the
leave when it's not
Enosburg
juicy.
Business Association needs for the Harvest Fest. We've got the Lincoln Park Park Use Permit, and then the Lincoln Park Bandstand Permit. Staff does not see any issues with either of these applications, recommends approval. Board had also asked for an update at your next meeting, which would be tonight, on the status of the alcohol use permit, as there were some things missing in the permit that you approved at your last meeting in August. So during that period to tonight, we have received all of the additional attachments that were required under the alcohol use permit, and that permit is complete.
I just have a question, since the applicant is a board member.
And I don't vote, but I have a comment that I need to make, because I could sit here and not make the comment, but it would sort of be a lie, so that probably is not a good thing for a board member to do. I received a communique today from Groenfeld Meadery out of Georgia, Vermont, who is pretty sure they have already done their paperwork with the state of Vermont. They thought their application and their check was already in to me, and it is not. But they called today to see if they could still come and do the Harvest Festival, and they are aware of the fact that with the state of Vermont Liquor Control Department, they need to get their paperwork done 5 days before the event. And so even if they hadn't had it done this morning, and I'm waiting to hear back from him tonight or tomorrow morning, they would technically, with the state, still have time. But that is in the air. Now I'll back up again.
But if it's 5 days, they need approval 5 days, or just have
No,
to
they
get
need
the
to apply
paperwork?
5 days
Only
before
apply,
that, yeah,
okay.
for DLC.
Okay, so are you recusing yourself? from
Yes,
this
I am
vote?
recusing myself.
Okay, I guess I will hear a motion from the board to accept Lincoln Park permit requests from the Enosburg Business Association in regards to the Harvest Festival.
Move.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, that's unanimous.
Did you do both? There's two there. The park use and then the bandstand.
I thought he rolled them both in.
Yeah, I thought I
Okay.
did. Permits, yes. Okay. All right, up next, Enosburg Fire Department request for coin drop.
So in the board's packet, you'll see a letter from Mark LaRose, who's the fire chief for the Enosburg Volunteer Fire Department. The fire department is requesting to do a coin drop along Main Street in the vicinity of the intersection of Orchard Street on September 18th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is something that they have requested a number of times in the past. Just to point out, this is also the day of the Harvest Festival. I think that's part of their plan, as they know we'll most likely receive more
Wee
than,
bit of extra traffic.
right, more than normal traffic patterns through the downtown. So, it's at your pleasure as a board as to whether you would like to approve this or not. You may also want to consider whether you want the fire department to have any additional insurance for the event. That's up to you.
I guess at this time, I'll ask any representatives from the Harvest Festival if they think that's a distraction from the event itself.
No, I don't think it's a distraction. I think that probably it's good marketing on their part to know that there, is going to be extra traffic in town. I guess I just would be, because there's going to be extra traffic, and I don't know if any of the rest of you have been on Main Street in the last few days, but I've been doing this quite often. Looking at a truck driver right in the eye and going, 2, 5, slow down. And it's all corn trucks. Corn truck after corn truck after corn truck. Moving just as fast as they can go to get that damn corn in and get it back to those 2 farms.
So they don't have any spare change, is what you're saying?
Yeah, well, they probably don't have any spare change, but I worry a little bit about the firemen. So it says they've got protective vest for safety. And I definitely think that there maybe should be a little bit of insurance involved because it's kind of risky.
They'd be in the road, right?
Yeah, they're right in the road.
Middle of the road.
And that being our road would make us liable? Or is that a state thing? I mean, we're on the
That's a
road,
state
it's not
highway.
on our property.
No, it's
If
not.
someone got hurt, it could potentially end up in the courts, and the courts would decide whether, the person that was injured did something they shouldn't have, or whether the village was
I mean, the fire department must have insurance.
liable for
That's the
allowing
thing,
them
I
to do it
would
in the
assume the
first
fire
place.
department had.
I mean, what we did in the one I just recused myself from was we sent you our insurance paperwork right along with, and we could just ask them if, we could see a copy.
Well, we just make a condition, we'll accept the request on the condition that they do have insurance. And leave it up to them, I mean, I'm sure they have it.
They must.
They have to. So, I'll hear a motion.
Come on.
You know the first or second?
I'll second.
Heather with the second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed nay. All right, that's unanimous.
We should make a little money that day.
Yeah, hopefully.
And they need it.
Oh, yeah, it is looking good this year. Okay, next agenda item is Board of Trustees Village Communication.
So I requested to have that on here. And the request is something I've been thinking about a lot, but it came up partially in response to the last trustees meeting. I wear a lot of hats as a resident trustees, but also through my different work and projects. And the big thing that I hear is I didn't know that was happening. And, there's a responsibility, I feel, on both parts of the community to look for information of what's going on, but also for the organizations to share information and make sure that it's accessible to the different demographics. And I know at the beginning of the year, we said that we would put, warn our meetings in the usual spots, but I'm very concerned that it's not hitting all the demographics. And meetings that have information that's really important to the community, it's not necessarily as visible to them as it could be. And there's a couple of other places that could be more accessible, and I would like to consider and talk about, should we post at the library that has a huge amount of foot traffic? We sometimes put stuff on Front Porch Forum, we sometimes put stuff on Facebook, but it's not routine. That's where some people are. That could spark some more community conversation. And then there's the schools, like especially the high school, and start inviting the young people that live in our community to be part of our community and be part of the conversations and have a greater level investment. So that's kind of like where it was coming from. I hear on our side our frustration that people aren't coming to meetings, and then I hear other people feeling I'm not invited. And it's not just the trustees, it's pretty much every organization I've worked with, but I'm a trustee, and I would like us to consider advertising our meetings and other things that are happening in more places than our typical 3 places.
I think at least Facebook, because that seems to be the one platform that will cross all major demographics. You know, everyone has Facebook.
Yeah, lots of people do.
I like the
Internet,
library idea too.
and the library too, because there's some people who aren't on Facebook. There's some people who don't use the internet. And I was talking with Brenda, and there's so many people that use the library for resources.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think the
she
library is an
has
excellent place.
a municipal board that doesn't get used. Nobody else is allowed to post anything on it unless it's municipal stuff. I think there was like a road closing post that was posted on it last time, but the select board and the trustees were not utilizing that.
Is that the one right in front of the cemetery?
No, it's like in the library.
Right, but there is also another.
We have a community bulletin board right in front of
Yeah.
That
one of
doesn't
my
seem-
snarky comment is on right now. It says buy local or buy local.
Oh, nice. But yeah, like the library, because they see about 1,000 people a month. And it's just a lot of different demographics go in there. And I think that's the thing is there's just certain demographics that use the places where we post right now. And then we're missing other demographics.
Well, so we just need a few additional places and avenues of posting.
Yep. So that's just what I'm looking for, is just to like not have, so that it's just routine. We have
A couple
meetings
of
that are
extra
warned, they're
copies.
posted in a couple of extra places.
Mhm.
And Brenda said we could just email a copy to her and she'll print it and post it herself.
It's pretty easy.
That's
Yep.
easy.
It's
That-
getting easier now.
Between that and just throwing something up on Facebook, I think it's going to generate a lot of, I guess, internet traffic or whatever, interest.
Hopefully a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Sam, can I say one thing? Sorry. I think that's a great idea, because I think you're right. I think that unless you see an agenda item and you're like, oh, we need to have people there then I think, and Front Porch Forum, I think it's a really good spot too. I think
Front
that
Porch Forum reaches a completely
it
different
really does.
demographic than
Comes into
Facebook
your
does.
email and you see it takes 2 seconds to look through and you're like, oh,
I noticed Bakersfield's using that more.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how it's been working out for them.
I think it's,
We utilize it a
legitimate's
lot.
not the right word, but it's a little less frivolous
Yeah.
than Facebook is.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, you could do both. There's nothing wrong with, don't look at me, but.
Right, and there's the calendar, and I don't like, with Front Porch Forum, so you can just like have like our meetings on the calendar for people. Haven't used that feature myself, but
We have a Front Porch Forum?
Mm-hmm.
We do.
There's one in Enosburg where the village is not signed up as a member. I think there's a fee.
No, it's free. EBA paid the fee when Front Porch Forum came to Enosburg.
I have a personal number.
Or it wouldn't
I
be
do
here.
too.
Be willing to post it if need be.
All right, well, we have put some things on if the board requested it, so there's a way to do it. But I thought if you were consistently
Nope.
like, logging in and stuff, that.
Nope, it's
there
free.
was a fee that went.
They ask for donations now,
Yeah.
once a year, but it's only a request for a donation.
yeah, and so like when you sign up under your name, you could just be yourself with your address. I don't think they post your address, but like, at least not your street number.
No.
But you can put yourself as like titles too. So like I'm not there as a trustee because I don't want to be representing the trustees when I post. But I think I might have myself as for after school director because I do post for work. Yeah, but just in Front Porch Forum, it does. I don't know if we would necessarily want the whole agenda on there or just a reminder and the website, but. It's not on everybody's radar that when we meet and how to look for stuff. And some people have a really, really hard time with websites.
Mhm.
And it's valid, so,
I feel like agenda items would be nice.
yeah.
That way people can, they can, I know
What's
that
coming up?
it's not always the most
They can
juicy
be
meetings.
interested
They
or
can pick
not.
through it, and if it's just a bunch of, housekeeping stuff, I don't need to go to that one. But if it's hot button stuff,
Yeah.
then, we can generate some interest that way. But yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with directing staff to post at the library, Facebook, and Front Porch Forum. If we think that'll help. That shouldn't be too difficult.
Because right now, where are we besides the
It's,
post office?
the village office is in the messenger. Okay.
We post the Community National Bank on their bulletin board, it gets posted.
Oh, the one that's inside the ATM?
No, as you walk into Community National Bank, they have a big.
Oh,
bulletin
Community
board on the
National,
left.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
That one up there?
yep, the one up, well, right across from us, or up the wall.
Yeah.
And, we post there in the post office, and then at the
Right,
village
the post
office.
office, yeah.
And I have to
And
tell
then
you
on our website
a wee
as well.
story
So
about
there's-
the one at the
right now,
post
there's
office.
4 places that we post our agendas.
The ones at the post office, you can only read if you're
Until
not
I became a
4'11" and a
trustee, I
half.
didn't know
Yeah, the
Because I
bulletin
can't,
board
I
is
can't
very
even see
high.
the words, it's up
Yeah.
so high.
And you can't
I
read
hold
it
my
if you're
phone
there
up
with
and
your
take a picture
child.
of it.
The bulletin board
Now
is
you'll be able to see it on
higher.
Facebook, so.
I
Yeah.
don't. do
And again,
this.
like, not everybody goes to those places.
Right.
And Community National is kind of behind the doors unless you go out of your way to look at it, their doors are open.
Now, you wouldn't mind posting on Front Porch Forum,
Nope, not at all.
where the village can even make its own account, I would assume?
Yeah, I'll look into that if the village can set up their own account. I mean, but I do have a personal account, which I'd have no problem posting if need be.
It's a very well-run organization. I
It is.
mean, and there's never anything offensive on it. There's never anything out of the way.
They're really
It's
quick to saying, no, that doesn't follow our rules.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, is that all the discussion for that item?
That's what I was looking for.
All right. So we will move on to manager's report.
Thank you, Sam. First, I want to direct the board's attention to a report from Amy Brewer, coordinator for the Tobacco Prevention Coalition, regarding the tobacco cleanup effort held in Enosburg Falls on August 18th. That's attached to the back of the manager's report if you want to see some of the detail on that. A couple of highlights, though, were that in 2 hours on that day, they picked up 1,793 cigarette butts in Lincoln Park and along Main Street and in parking lots near the Opera House and in front of other businesses along sidewalks and curbs. One thing that she does report is there was actually a decrease in this from last year, where at a similar point in the summer in 2020, they had picked up 2,050 cigarette butts. So there's a little bit of a decrease from last year. Maybe that's some good news, but
So bless Ellen, she didn't have to pick up as many this year
right.
because she gets most of them.
Right. So, but some other interesting information in there if you guys want to read that report in more detail. Next, I want to make the board aware that last week we were informed that our 1994 digger truck in our electric department failed the dielectric portion of its inspection. So specifically, the part that failed was the upper boom section of the truck. And what that basically means is that it can conduct electric current, which it's not supposed to, and therefore there's the potential for an employee to be shocked if they're working on the vehicle. We're working on multiple levels to find a solution to this issue. It is the only digger truck that we have. Swanton Electric has told us they can loan us a digger truck if we need it, provided they don't have an emergency that they need their digger truck for. So that might be able to help us, if Swanton isn't in an emergency situation themselves, but I don't think it's something we can completely rely on. But it's good to know that, as usual, Swanton has stepped forward to say they'll do what they can for us. And that's some comfort. Dave Westcom, our lead line technician, is in contact with the manufacturer and believes that the problems that have been causing the failure are relatively minor and could be fixed with a good cleaning of the boom. And he's currently talking with him about this option. It's probably the best case scenario for us. I do have a little bit of an update on that particular item that I can give you. And Dave gave me just this afternoon. He came into the office and we had a discussion about where he is in that process and in talking to the manufacturer. So there's one other issue that's been discovered, and that is that there is also a bend in what he's referring to as a rod within the boom that would have to get replaced. And he's working with the manufacturer right now to see how much that part of it would cost. So that would be in addition to just the cleaning. Dave, off the top of his head, thought it might be like around $2,000 figure to replace that. So the two together, then, if it came out around that ballpark, would be $2,700. But that, in my opinion at least, would still be the best case scenario for us. That's still a relatively cheap
Yeah,
fit.
a lot
Is
cheaper
it
than a new
possible the
one.
bent rod is causing the dielectric failure?
Maybe it's possible.
Contacting both sides of the boom or something?
Maybe it's possible, yeah, I'm not sure. When Dave was describing what was happening to the manufacturer, and they haven't actually seen it, he was just describing, the report that was given to us by the company that did the inspection, and then, trying to give a, verbal description of what he was seeing visually. So they haven't actually seen the vehicle yet, they're just going off of what Dave's descriptions to them have been. So they may, once they are actually able to see it themselves and go over it, they may have another option too that they hadn't thought of just in the phone conversations. But Dave did tell me this afternoon that was something else that came up, and he thought off the top of his head maybe about $2,000 on that item. So I still think for $2,700, if we can get that truck working and safe again, that's probably our best case scenario. And the company, which is called CUE, C-U-E, that would be doing this is located down in Mass. But the good news is they said they could get us in very quickly. So, and they could even send a driver out to come pick the truck up. They'd have to take it down in Mass to do the work. But they said they could send a driver out to pick up the truck, drive it down there, and then we might have to send guys down to go pick it up when they were finished. But all said and done, I think that's probably our best case scenario with that.
Would they be able to test it before we went and picked it
Yeah,
up?
they would test it, and they also can do an inspection. So they would actually run it through the whole inspection cycle and make sure that everything was running properly and give it a passing inspection before they handed it back to us. So another area that we're working on, though, in the short term is Alan Plouffe, who's also one of our line technicians, is looking into seeing whether there's a possible short-term rental company out there that, we could maybe, if we got in a pinch, say we had a bad storm come in and we had some outages, we had to deal with them, and Swanton had the same thing and had to use their truckers, their digger trucks, so couldn't loan us theirs. Is there a company out there where we could do, a 30-day rental or something from them? And Alan is still looking into that. He hasn't found anyone yet, but he's still looking into that possibility, whether there's someone out there that would allow us to do a short-term rental on a digger truck for them. Or possibly a contractor. There's contractors out there too that sometimes you could hire, that they would come with a man to run their piece of equipment. But that's another possibility too that Dave and Alan are looking into, is if there isn't a rental vehicle, is there a contractor out there where, they send you a guy along with the equipment, but maybe, they'd let you do that for a specific event. If you had an outage that you need someone for 2 days or something, they'd let you, for a fee, obviously, rent the vehicle and an operator together. So that's another area that we're looking into. The real solution, though, of course, as we discussed last budgeting season, is we need to get a new digger truck. Dave Westcomb has made additional inquiries this week to find out about the availability and also lead times on a new digger. Due to the continued problems associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, we're now being told that there's a 2-year lead time on receiving a new digger truck. And that's from the time the order is actually placed. So Dave and I will be recommending to the trustees, as part of the electric department's 2022 budget discussions, that the village put in an order for a new digger truck during the first quarter of 2022, knowing that it's 2 years before we're even gonna get it, so. But giving you a heads up on that too, that's gonna be part of Dave and I's recommendation to you guys for next year's electric department budget. But remember, keep in mind, the payments on that wouldn't hit for another 2 years. You don't pay for it up front. You start paying for it once you get the delivery of the truck and it passes a successful inspection by our crew. So they get to, test it and drive it, operate the equipment and everything on it. And once our crew is finished with their testing process and we accept, final delivery of the truck, then, that's when payments would kick in. So probably be sometime around 2024 on that. But, of course, that decision is the Board of Trustees to make, but I'm just giving you a heads up that that's a recommendation that Dave and I plan on making to you guys once we get into the 2022 budget discussions. So digger truck obviously is an essential piece of equipment for any electric department. And we'll keep the board informed as we continue to work for a solution on this item here. Hopefully, the option of getting our current 94 truck cleaned and maybe replacing this rod, if that's also what's needed, is going to work out. And the fact that they said they could get us in there quickly gives me some hope that maybe we're going to have a quick turnaround with that and get the truck back in use within the next couple of weeks. Next, wanted to give the board an update on the ARPA funds and what we have received from these federal funds to date. So we've received 2 payments from 2 different sources within the ARPA umbrella. So we've received 1 payment from the local fiscal recovery program for $67,157.19. That's 1 of 2. We should be receiving a second payment under that program. And then we've also received a payment under the local fiscal recovery county program for $124,603.85. That is also the first of 2 payments we're supposed to receive under that program as well. So total to date that we've received in ARPA funds is $191,761.04. So just want to make you guys aware of that we have received 2 payments now under the ARPA program. Those are being held in an account, and Abby's tracking those. And other communities around Vermont are receiving similar types of payments under the ARPA funds. And we'll have to start having discussions, not immediately, but over the coming months, we'll need to have some discussions about what kind of priorities the board wants to set for the spending of these funds. We do have time to work this out. It's not like they have to be spent next year or anything. We have several years to figure this out and get the money spent. And Northwest Regional Planning Commission is recommending to all of its members that all of the municipal boards receiving ARPA funds should take their time, should have, good, well thought out discussions about what your priorities are within your community for these funds before you, make a heavy commitment in one direction or another. Okay, and then lastly, I wanted to just give the board an update on the ordinance drafts that you guys have asked staff to work on. So you guys will recall that you've made requests for 2 sets of 2 different ordinance amendments to be made. One updating the format of our local speed limits to comply with state legislation currently, and the second being an amendment possible, which we didn't really talk about where it was going to go in the ordinances, but it could go possibly under our noise ordinance that would prohibit the use of certain loud customized vehicle exhaust systems. The board also asked that these be taken up together once they're in good draft shape. So I just want to let you guys know that the speed limit draft, I think is pretty well done. We also sent it down to the Sheriff's Department to get any feedback that the Sheriff's Department might have about the draft that local staff put together. We have taken the sheriff's department comments into account and put them into the draft. Regarding the exhaust issue and where we're going to place that in an ordinance, I have contacted Don Cloud, the city manager for the city of St. Albans, regarding that request, and Don responded back to me that they are in the process of putting together a new draft on the city of St. Albans' proposed changes. And once he has that new draft finished, he will forward it to me so that we could look at it and have a review of it ourselves. So once I receive that, I will take both parts of this, send them down to our attorney for our attorney's review, see if he's got any comments, and then once we've heard back from our attorney, I will schedule this for the next regular Board of Trustees meeting for the board to review and make any comments you want to about these two drafts. So just let me know if any questions, but I wanted to give you an update as to where we are with those two different ordinance changes. And that's it for manager's report.
Speaking of sheriff's department, apparently Roger sat on Orchard Street maybe last week in the morning early, and he was on Water Tower, I think this morning, writing out a few tickets. So
And he got
That's
on
good.
Orchard Street at like 4:30 in
Yeah.
the morning to hit the really morning.
I heard
Traffic.
the highest score on Orchard Street was 70.
Oh, somebody was doing well.
Yeah, I heard that as well a couple of weeks ago, so apparently people are not paying attention still.
So
It'll
hopefully
probably take a
if
few
they,
more tickets getting written before they get the message.
Hit them in their wallet.
hopefully he keeps writing them.
Yeah,
I'd be
well,
really
that's good.
curious, we
That's-
should mark this date in when we go back and look at the speed signs
See if
data
it changed.
and see how much of an effect that did have on those.
Mm.
Yep.
That's actually something that we should.
I'm pretty sure it was
probably
this morning. It was this morning. I saw him on Water Tower pulling people over.
Well, that's good news. I appreciate you telling us, Eli, because we want, as much law enforcement as we can get in the village, and I'm really glad to hear they're focusing on Orchard and
He's
Water
actually
Tower.
coming through on what he said he was going to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, enforcement needs to be exactly that.
Something along those similar lines, I received a letter from a resident just explaining his frustration with speeding on Elm and Pleasant. And he made the request to put a lighted speed limit sign on Pleasant Street as well as Elm. So whenever those lighted signs are done being where they are right now, we gotta get those moved.
Yeah, I would
Do
definitely
one
like to see
like
them somewhere else.
church.
Yeah, we can,
Yeah.
Pleasant
if
or
you guys
something.
want, we can put one on Pleasant next, if you want. You remember you guys also made commitments to the residents on Church Street
At Pleasant and Church, I think, need to
as
get it
well.
done.
So Pleasant Church next.
Sounds good.
How
to
long
me.
have they been on Orchard, and
I think it was,
did we set a time limit?
yeah, well, you guys
90
had
days.
said every 3 months we
Okay.
should rotate them, either spin them around or put them on a
Right,
different
put 'em on a
street.
different
Spun out-
street.
They've been,
So,
it's
They've
been
been
spun
spun
around,
once.
but I feel like 3 months might even be too long. Like, I know 3 months was like when they were saying is when they stopped losing their effectiveness. But it's just, we have problems in so many places in the village.
I would like to let him be up a little bit longer after the sheriff did that little kind of sting operation.
Right, to see.
Just to
what
see,
I'm saying,
I'm really
look at the data.
curious now. But yeah, once these are up, once they've done their thing, we'll get those moved to Pleasant and Church. Just to acknowledge that I received his letter. Okay. Is there any other business tonight? Are we ready to call it quits?
I move we adjourn.
All right, Sandy was first.
She-
No,
Ellen?
just a tiny question. Someone mentioned the select board, and I was wondering if there was gonna be a joint meeting, or if there were more joint meetings in the future.
I believe we reached out to them, right?
Sorry.
no, actually, I had that scheduled though for your next board meeting to ask the question of the trustees. I believe it's our turn to host a night. And we probably still have it in this room in order to accommodate both boards. But it could be on a Board of Trustees regular meeting night as opposed to a Select Board's regular meeting night. And I'm pretty sure it's the trustees' turn to host the meeting, so I had that scheduled for your next meeting on the 28th to ask the question, do you guys want me to reach out to the select board with a few proposed dates? You know, normally we'll send them 2-3 possible dates that will work for you guys, and, you know, let them choose one of those dates that will work for them.
I say we brought it up now, we might just move forward.
Yeah.
October 12th or 26th?
Yeah, let's do this
Okay,
before budget.
well,
I mean, we've got the 28th as our next meeting, but we're, you know, kind of got a bunch of stuff going here.
Yeah, I think, yeah, either that or we can just reach out and ask them, you know, they may be slammed.
See what day works for
Because
them.
ours in October are the 12th and the 26th.
Yeah. Typically, we do have a meeting in October, right? It's like October and April or October and May or something. Spring and fall, basically.
Yeah, it's basically spring and fall. We've met in November sometimes too. It's kind of varied, but I would say usually October and November for the fall meeting.
It would give us some time to bring up if there are any budget things that we want to be
Yes.
focused on.
Right. Yeah, let's reach out to them and see what works for them. It is our turn to host, so we'll do it on one of our regular nights, I think, unless anybody
Yeah.
has any objections to that. And then we'll also try to be thinking of items that could come up for an agenda. So, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
Thank you,
Hey,
Ellen.
Ellen.
Thanks for hanging out with us, Ellen, and sticking it through.
Okay, so do you want to bring that up at next meeting then? Or did you guys,
I think just do it now.
Unless they get back
Talk
to us with
about it.
dates by then.
so I guess that was my question. Are you telling me to contact them now with the two
Yes.
dates in October?
Yep.
Okay.
Might as well start so we can find out.
Yeah. Save us an item next week.
Give them 2 more weeks' notice.
Okay, any other business? Okay, Sandy had a first to adjourn. Is there a
Second.
second? Heather with the second. All those in favor of adjourning say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. All right.